Hi dear students, today let us explore about the chapter friction. Sounds similar, right? Yes. Today we are going to explore about a type of force which is a contact force. That is the friction. We know that friction is a type of force which is a contact force, meaning it comes into existence only when the two objects are in contact with each other. Today we are going to explore how does this frictional force come into existence, whether it is acting as a foe in our life or it is acting as a friend in our life, or are there any instances where we wantedly increase the friction, and are there any instances if we wantedly decrease the friction. Basically, we are going to dive into the concept of friction and get to know about it. To keep you updated, I'm telling you that in this video, we will be having the quiz sessions in between the video. So make sure that you pause the video there and take the quiz and then continue back.
What is friction? Friction is the force which opposes the applied force acting in an opposite direction and tries to stop the motion.
So let's get started. Coming to the definition of friction. Children, it's very simple. We say friction is basically a touch of one object with the another object. If I talk about the friction in terms of science, it is a type of a contact force that comes into existence when the two objects are in contact with each other, and it actually tries to oppose the applied force on an object. For example, if I talk about this chalk, if it is falling down, if I make it freely fall down, there will be certain friction which is offered by the air molecule on this on this chalk piece, which might reduce the speed of this chalk piece. So basically, friction is the force which opposes the applied force and it tries to stop the motion in most of the cases. Apart from that, the friction also produces the heat. That is the reason why when we bring the two objects, one hand is one object, another hand is another object, if we bring the two objects closer to each other and rub them, the frictional force which is there, it produces the heat. The friction which is caused produces the heat. So friction also produces the heat. Basically, friction is the type of a contact force that comes into existence when the two objects are in contact with each other, and whenever they are in contact with each other, the frictional force which is acting on them will try to stop their motion because it always opposes the applied force. This is all about the definition of the friction. Now coming to the characteristics of the friction, or else what are the factors on which the friction depends. To talk about the frictional force, let us first see how is this frictional force coming into contact. Think that, children, there are two surfaces over here. Now I told you that whenever these two surfaces come in contact with each other, frictional force arises. It comes into existence. Now how is this frictional force coming into existence? That is what we are going to see over here. Now to look, both the surfaces are looking very smooth to me, are looking very even to me. But let me tell you that even the polished surfaces which look really smooth in their nature, even they also have got the uneven surfaces. That means they have got the irregularities on their surfaces, even the polished surfaces. Then there will be some of the surfaces which will already be looking uneven. They will have this kind of irregularities. Right? I'm talking about a microscopic structure, children. If you talk about the microscopic structure of the object, this is how the surfaces of the different objects might appear. These will be the smooth objects and these will be the rough objects. So think that the two objects, the smoother objects, they come in contact with each other. So what will happen whenever they are in contact with each other? The two surfaces are in contact with each other. One surface's irregularities will go and get interlocked with the irregularities of the other surface. Can you see the interlocking happening over here? This is how the irregularities will get interlocked with each other. That will make us feel difficult to remove the object. For example, think that This is the marble floor. This surface is a marble floor and this surface is a box. It can be any box that I'm trying to move. Whenever I try to move, I obviously get to know that I have to apply a lot of force. Now I have to apply the force because there is the friction already existing due to the interlocking of the irregularities. Now if I have to overcome this interlocking, then I have to apply a lot of force. That is the reason why whenever we try to move the object from the rest, we have to apply the force. So friction arises only when the irregularities on the surfaces get interlocked. Now, if the irregularities are less, the interlocking will be less. When interlocking is less, friction will be less. Whenever there is less friction, you have to apply less force to move the object from its place. Whenever there are more irregularities on the surfaces, the interlocking will be tighter. Whenever the interlocking is tight, frictional force produced is more. Whenever friction is more, we have to apply more force to move the object from the surface. For example, if I put a pencil on a towel, we know that a towel will have a lot of irregularities on its surface. Though the surface of the pencil is very smooth, it has to overcome the irregularities which are there on the towel surface. That means it has to overcome a lot of friction, and that's the reason why moving a pencil on the towel floor becomes difficult. So this is what the process of existence of the friction looks like. How the friction arises, it looks like this. Now, what are the different factors on which the friction depends? That is what we are going to cover up now. Just now we got to know that friction comes into existence only when there are interlocking of the irregularities happening. That means the first factor on which the friction depends is the irregularities on the surfaces. If the irregularities are more, friction will be more. If the irregularities are less, friction will be less. This is the first thing. Second thing is weight of the object. Let me give you one example, children. Let's take the same example that I was having. Think that I am trying to actually move the box which is kept on the marble floor. I know that marble floor is smoother. It will not have many irregularities, but as how I told you, even the polished surfaces are having the irregularities. So even the marble floor also will have some of the irregularities. Now these irregularities, when they come in contact with the irregularities on the surface of the box, friction is produced. Think of two different situations wherein I have to apply a heavier object in one of the cases, and in the other case, I have to move the object which is lighter. So this case is heavier object is moved, and in this case a lighter object is moved. What do you feel, in which case do I have to apply the less force? This one or this one? Obviously this one, because this object will be lighter in its nature, right? This is all because, children, whenever a heavy object is there, now due to the weight of the object, it gets pressed harder onto the floor, right? That means the irregularities on the box surfaces will get tightly interlocked with the irregularities on the floor. That is what is making the friction become stronger. Whenever there is more friction, it will require a lot of force to overcome the friction, and that's the reason why I have to apply an extra force to move the heavy object. But in case of light object, the irregularities are not tightly packed, and that's the reason why it will take less efforts to move the lighter object. So the frictional force depends on two factors. One is irregularities, another one is weight of the object. If irregularities are more, friction will be more. If irregularities are less, friction will be less. Weight of the object, if it is more, the friction will be more. If it is less, the friction will be less. Basically, both of them are directly proportional to the frictional force. Now, once we have understood what is friction and what are the factors on which the friction depends and how does the friction comes into existence, let us take up a small quiz and let's check your understanding.
What happens to the friction when irregularities on the surface area increase? The frictional force increases. Which are the three types of frictions? Static friction. The the frictional force which resists the motion of the stationary object. Sliding friction, the frictional force which resists the motion of the sliding object. Rolling friction, the frictional force which resists the motion of the rolling object.
Welcome back, students. I hope you were able to score out of out in the last quiz. Let us proceed further and keep waiting for the next quiz. Now, once we know about the factors which are affecting the friction, now let us move on further and check where in the daily life do we come across this friction? Wherein? How is it acting? To talk about it, let's start like this. It's a very cold day. I think that it's the winter season and the day is really cold. What is the basic action that we do, children? We rub our palms. Think if there is no friction, will there be heat produced in our hands? Obviously no. That means in this case, the friction who's actually producing the heat is acting as our friend. Right? Apart from that, think about the brakes which are applied whenever we want to stop the vehicle. Those brakes come into existence only when there is friction between the two objects which are actually trying to stop the motion. If there is no frictional force existing, brakes cannot be applied. Think about a situation where we are riding the vehicles and we are unable to stop them. Next, think, I want to walk on the floor. If there is no friction, will I get the sufficient grip? Not possible. I want to wash the dishes. I want to wash the dishes. Now the dish has got a stain, a very hard stain on it. If I want to remove it, I need the friction that is caused whenever I scrub the vessel with the scrubber. Think if there is no friction between the scrubber and the vessel, will it be possible for me to remove the stain? Not possible. Think there is something there on the surface and I want to remove it. Basically, if it is on a cloth, I will take two sides of the cloth and I'll just rub them over each other. As a result, whatever is hard in its nature will simply come out. This is all because the friction is caused. If there is no friction, that activity again cannot happen. In all the cases, we just get to know that friction is actually important. Without friction, we'll not be able to do anything, right? So friction is required in all these cases, so it will be acting as a friend. Let us think about these situations. If I take new slippers and start using them, depending on how much I walk, the maximum time where I'll be able to wear those slippers might be like 7 months or 8 months. If I walk more, those might get torn within 3 to 4 months. Now this wear and tear is happening is all because of the friction, right? The surface irregularities of the slipper, when it comes in contact with the floor irregularities, then only we are able to get the grip due to the friction. But this friction sometimes becomes too much that there will be wear and tear of the slipper soles. One activity. Second one, you might have seen whenever the mixers are used for a longer period of time, a motor rotates inside. Now due to this, a lot of heat is generated due to the friction. Now this heat might make the instrument or the electronic gadget or the electronic device to get damaged soon, right? Here in these two cases we see that the friction is not necessary. If it is not there, the things will happen in a better way. That means friction can act as both friends and foe. Now, being human beings, it is our responsibility to make sure that the friction which is there, when it is acting as a friend, how can we make it more friendly? If it is acting as a foe, how can we make it friendly? And if it is acting as a friend, how can we make it more friendly? That is what we need to see, right? So the researches were made, and through the general observations that we have taken through the daily life, we have been evolving the steps to reduce the friction somewhere, to increase the friction somewhere, so that we try to deal with the friction in a good manner. Now let us take an example to understand how do we increase and how do we decrease the friction so that it is useful in our daily life. Children, we know, just now I said that friction is, friendly sometimes, but then the friction that is there in the hinges of the door, it produces that cracking sound, which is really irritating sometimes. Now to do this, what do? We apply some oil. Now this oil, what will it do? It, just because it is slippery in its nature, will go and sit on the metallic parts. Whenever those metallic parts will move, first due to the friction, they used to produce the cracking sound. But just because now the oil has made the surfaces smooth, the friction is reduced. Due to the reduced friction, we get to see that there will be no cracking sound in the hinges of the doors. This is an activity where we actually try to reduce the friction wantedly so that everything is easy for us. Second application of it is, you might have seen whenever we play the carom, we apply some powder. We know that whenever the spikes are stickers are moving onto the carom board, those stickers have to come across the friction which is produced due to the interlocking of the irregularities. Now to overcome this, we apply the powder. Powder makes the surface smooth, and then it will help us to make the stickers easily so that we win the game. Here, to reduce the friction, we are applying actually certain substances like oil, the powder, talcum powder. We are applying so many substances which are actually reducing the friction. Now those substances which can reduce the friction are known as lubricants. Lubricants are the substances which have the capacity to reduce the friction through the process of lubrication. That means when we apply the oil and we apply the powder, the process is called as lubrication. And what we are actually applying, which is reducing the friction, will now become the lubricant. So this is about the lubricants and lubrication. Then, another situations where we actually reduce the friction is, you might have seen the people who want to lift the weight, they actually apply some powder on their hand so that they get that friction, right? When they get the grip, they'll be able to lift the heavy weight. If the weight is slipping from their hand, it will become difficult for them to take it up, and that's the reason why the powder is applied. This is all about the places where we increase the friction, right? And apart from that, you might have seen kabaddi players, when they want to play the kabaddi, before they start the match, they basically touch the soil and rub their hands so that the soil particles, they get stuck. We know that this will make their hands become slippery. So the opponent team member, whenever he tries, or when we want to, whenever we go to the opponent team and we want to escape from the situation, we have to make sure that our hands are slippery. So that will happen due to the reduced friction that is caused due to the application of the soil particles on the hand. So these are some of the instances, children, where we increase or reduce the friction. To give you more examples, we have seen the shoes with the spikes. You might have seen most of the sportsmen, they buy the shoes which are really spiked, and they are very sharply spiked, so that the more number of spikes which are there, they are actually increasing the friction on the ground, and they will be able to walk or jump or do whatever the physical activity they want to do without slipping. This is all because those spiked shoes will increase the friction to get more grip on the ground, right? So there are various instances from the daily life where we see that sometimes we apply the friction wantedly, increase the friction wantedly, sometimes we reduce the friction wantedly. We keep doing it in our daily life. So, after knowing this concept, let's take a short quiz. Welcome back, students. I hope you scored out in the last quiz. Now let us proceed to the last part of the chapter. Children, we often come across the word fluid, right? In science, fluid means the liquids as well as the gases. You might be wondering, why are we talking about fluids, ma'am, here in this context? Let us explore much about it. So then, so far, the places where I gave you the examples, the friction exists, we increase the friction or we reduce the friction, we basically saw only the solids into the picture, right? Lubricants were the only liquids that we saw. Apart from that, all the other places where the friction was increased or reduced were pertaining to the solids. Now the question arises, are the solids only materials which are exerting the frictional force? Are the gases not exerting the force? Are the liquids not exerting the force? To answer this question, we have to know about the fluids. So basically, in science terminology, fluids means the liquids and the gases, right? Children, you might have seen, newly, when we try diving into the water, it is not possible. Our body tries to float on the surface of the water, but it will never go inside. This all happens because this liquid actually exerts a pressure or a force, right? It exerts a force on a body which stops the motion of our body. In the studying of the chapter, we studied that friction is a type of force which reduces the motion. So when this liquid is exerting the force which is trying to stop our motion, that means it is also exerting the friction. Same way it goes with the gases also. You might have seen air, when heavy wind blows, will not be able to tolerate. We will go back. Instead of moving forward, we go back because the wind will be blowing from this direction. That means even the gases have the capacity to exert the force, the frictional force. So the frictional force which is exerted by the liquids and the gases is called as drag, or it is called as fluid friction. So what is so special about this fluid friction and why should we be studying it? Obviously a question arises in the mind, right? The answer is that, children, if you look into the nature, the fish, the birds, all of them are the creatures which have to be living either in the forest most of the time, living in the water most of the time, or else they have to be living in the air most of the time. And I'm telling you that liquids and gases will exert the frictional force on the objects moving through them. That means there is something special that is from the nature that we want to know, that how to reduce drag or the frictional, fluid friction. For example, if I want my ship to move forward, don't you feel like when the ship enters the water, it is somewhere similar to the fish? Now the fish is moving through the water, it is able to pass easily. Then if I want my ship also to pass, there is something special that has to be there in the ship so that it also moves like a fish only. Children, you might have seen either the birds or the fishes, they have got this kind of a body, which is broad at the center and tapering towards the ends. This type of a body is called as streamline body. Now this streamline body is a special shape which exists in the nature which will help the organism to overcome the drag and move forward, right? You might have seen the birds, when they move forward, it's actually their beak that comes into picture, no? They will be having a tapering end. So, see, if the object surface is like this, when the object moves into the fluid, no? So this much of the area will be exposed to the force, the friction. But here if I have to move, I have to only overcome the friction which is there at this point. Here I have to overcome the friction offered by this much of area. That means when I make the shapes like this, it will be very easy for me to cut the friction because I have to overcome a friction at a very small surface area. That's the reason why these shapes, these fish and birds have got the special shape. We got inspired by this, and that is the reason why all the ships and all the aeroplanes and all are built based on this streamlined body design. Because whenever the body is streamlined, the frictional force that has to be overcome from the front will be very less, and the objects will be easily able to move in the fluids. That's the reason why naturally also the organisms are being given with a special shape of streamlined body, and we being human beings inspired by this have also built the objects which are having a streamlined body to easily cut the drag and move forward. Apart from this, you might also have seen the birds moving in herds. Whenever they move in herds, in groups, it is actually they are overcoming the friction. me alone moving it, if I simply hold the hand of my friend, my energy and her body energy will get added up because we are moving in the same direction. And as a result, the force which is offered from the opposite direction can be overcome easily. And that's the reason why sometimes the birds will also move in groups. I hope you all have understood now. Fluids are the liquids and the gases in the scientific terminology. These fluids offer a frictional force to the objects who are moving through them. So that is called as a drag, or it is called as fluid friction. To overcome this fluid friction, streamlined body is given to the objects or the organisms, because whenever they have to overcome the fluid friction, they have to lose the energy. If they lose more energy, it will become difficult for them to survive, and that's the reason why, to overcome the drag and to save their energy, their body designs a streamline. Inspired by the same idea, even we human beings have started making the objects that have to move in the fluid in a streamlined shape so that it is easy for them to overcome the friction and move forward. So, I hope you became the master of friction by now. Let's take up a quiz and we shall meet in the next video. Thank you.
What are fluids? Gases and liquids are termed as fluids. What is drag? The friction offered by fluids is called drag, or the fluid friction. Why do objects moving in fluids be given the special shapes? To overcome the drag and lose less energy during the same process.